I am Madison Holloway, 30-years-old woman. I co-owned a boutique design firm in Charleston with my older sister, Elise, until a discovery shattered everything I thought we'd built. What happened next changed everything. The last time I saw Elise sketch without hesitation was at that coffee shop on East Bay Street, the one with mismatched furniture and the barista who always remembered our names. It was raining outside, hard enough to blur the windows, and she had her sketchbed open, her pencil moving like her hand was remembering a rhythm her heart had forgotten. We were only there to kill time between meetings. I had my laptop out, scrolling contracts. She had a cinnamon bun she barely touched. Then out of nowhere she whispered, "What if we stopped doing the safe stuff?" I looked up. "What do you mean?" She turned the pad toward me. A sketched layout, wildly impractical, gloriously beautiful. Split-level skylights, asymmetrical support beams, a floating fireplace in the center. "That'll never pass code," I said, smiling. "Not yet," she replied, "but it will." That sketch would end up changing everything. We submitted it, revised, cleaned, legalized, to the Asheville Concept Build Expo. We didn't think we'd win. We did win. The judges called it a bold blend of industrial chaos and quiet retreat. I called it Elise's brain on paper. That was the month we went from two sisters with a shared Dropbox folder to Holloway and Holloway Studio. And for a while, it felt like the world was finally opening a door just wide enough for both of us. I'd wake up to emails from magazine editors. Elise would be up at 4 a.m., fussing over CAD files like she was building the Louvre. We worked out of our mom's converted sunroom, tripping over power cords and laughing every time the Wi-Fi dropped during a client Zoom. There was tension, sure. Elise was more instinct, I was more structure. She sketched in curves, I thought in angles. She was sunrise, I was afternoon rain. But it worked. God, it worked. Until it didn't. I started noticing small things first. Invoices sent twice. A vendor calling to confirm a payment that never showed. Elise brushing it off with a laugh, "Oh, my bad, must have missed that one." Then one afternoon our accountant, Rachel, called. Her voice was tight. "Hey, I'm looking at the Q4 statements. Did you approve these transfers to Studio Forward Consulting?" I hadn't. I didn't even know what that was. But Elise had. She told me it was for expansion strategy. Said she hired a consultant to help us scale faster. Claimed it was just a few thousand to get us in the door with a developer she met at an expo. I wanted to believe her. So I did. For a while. But the payments kept coming. $8,000 here. $12,000 there. All from our joint account. Our trust account. The one our father had built with 2 decades of sweat and blueprints and client dinners with wine-stained napkins. I confronted her on a Wednesday. Our mother's birthday of all days. I still remember the smell of lemon balm candles in the office. "Elise, what is this?" I asked, my finger on the transaction history. She blinked, gave me a half smile. "Oh, you weren't supposed to see that yet." I don't remember the exact words after that. Only that they were sharp. Only that she cried. Only that I didn't. That was the first time I realized how numb betrayal can feel. Not like fire. Not like ice. More like fog. Heavy, blinding, quiet. She confessed to some of it. Said the business needed a jolt. Said she borrowed against the future. Said I was too careful, that I held back when we could have grown 3 times faster. But what she didn't say was that she had set up her own LLC. Under her name alone. Using our address. She didn't have to say it. I found the paperwork 2 days later, buried in the bottom drawer of her desk. She hadn't even tried to hide it well. That hurt more than the theft. Because it meant she thought I wouldn't look. Or worse, that I'd look and still forgive her. When I confronted her again, she didn't deny it. She didn't even cry. She just stood there, arms crossed, and said, "I didn't want to live in your shadow forever, Mads." That's when I realized this wasn't about business. It was about her. And whatever part of her felt second best, even when I never asked her to be. I dissolved the partnership that week. Filed papers. Retained a lawyer. Blocked her access to our systems. Changed passwords. Canceled shared cards. It felt like amputating a limb while awake. Necessary. Agonizing. Permanent. She moved out of the studio without a word. Took her plants, her espresso machine, and half the original sketchbooks. Left the whiteboard notes behind, little doodles of smiling sun faces and "don't forget to eat," scrawled in pink. I sat on the floor that night and erased them one by one. Then cried into a takeout container of pad thai until 2 a.m. Clients asked questions. Some left. Most stayed. And slowly, painfully, I rebuilt. Under my name. Alone. But even now, even after everything, there are mornings when I pass a new sketch on my desk and think, she would have loved that line. And I wonder, does she ever pass a blank page and think of me? The first time I saw her again was 3 months after the papers were signed. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't ready. I was sitting by the window at that same cafe on East Bay, the one where we built our first dream, on a napkin, sipping an oat milk latte and pretending to read a book I'd carried around for weeks. And there she was. Not outside. Not walking in. Already there. At the corner table near the hallway to the restrooms, her head bent, a soft beanie over her dark hair, stirring a tea bag in circles like she was hypnotizing herself. I froze. My hand literally stopped midair with the coffee halfway to my lips. My heart didn't race, it sank. Because it wasn't like in the movies where the violins rise and everything rushes in. It was quieter than that. Like remembering a dream and realizing it had been real. I thought about leaving. Just walking out, pretending I hadn't seen her. But she looked up. Caught me. Her mouth parted slightly. And then for one fragile moment, she smiled. Small, tired, apologetic. I walked over. I didn't say her name. Just stood there. She gestured to the chair across from her. "It's still warm," she whispered. I sat down without a word. The silence between us felt both too loud and not enough. I could hear the cafe playlist, some acoustic indie track, and the hissing of steamed milk behind the counter, a couple laughing near the display case, the scraping of forks on ceramic. But between us, stillness. Her fingers curled around the mug. No nail polish, no rings. She looked thinner. Older. But something in her eyes, soft and glassy, still belonged to the girl who once stayed up with me until 4 a.m. sketching out the floating fireplace. "I didn't come here for you," she said finally. "I just forgot this place existed until my feet walked me in." I nodded. "It happens." Pause. "I saw your latest remodel, the beachfront house with the cedar siding. It's stunning." "Thanks." "I liked the light well in the staircase. That felt like you." That broke me a little. Because she remembered what my sketches felt like. And I'd spent months trying to forget what hers used to sound like on tracing paper. She stirred her tea again, though the bag was already wrung out and useless. "I'm in town for a bit," she said. "Vacation." She shook her head, trying to get clean, again. I blinked, clean. Her eyes dropped to her lap. Money wasn't the only thing I was taking. Suddenly, everything made sense. The wild energy, the crashes, the nights she couldn't sleep, the mornings she overcompensated with double shots and fake smiles. "You never told me. You never asked." "I didn't know." "You didn't want to." That one cut. Because it was probably true. I'd seen the cracks but painted over them with love and excuses. I'd called her impulsive, not unstable. Driven, not desperate. I told myself we were building an empire, but she was barely standing upright inside it. She looked up. I'm not here to ask for anything. Okay. I just wanted to say I miss knowing what you're designing. That almost made me laugh. Of all the things to miss. Not my voice. Not our late-night arguments. Not the smell of fresh-cut model board. But knowing what I was designing. Because that's what we had. Not a friendship. Not even a sisterhood, really. We had shared vision. I still draw sometimes, she said, sipping her cold tea. I'd like to see them. Her eyes snapped to mine. Really? I nodded. Maybe that was the first bridge, not forgiveness, not trust, just permission. Permission to exist in the same world again. The barista called out my name. My refill was ready. I got up. But before I left, I reached into my bag and pulled out a small notepad. I scribbled down the address of my studio, just the street, no suite number. I slid it across the table. If you ever want to drop something off, sketches or whatever. She stared at the paper. Didn't touch it. Didn't thank me. But I saw her eyes, the corners, fold inward with emotion. And that was enough. I walked out without looking back. But when I got home that night, there was a sketch waiting by my studio door. Folded, no note, just initials. And on the page, a tiny kitchen redesign with warm pendant lights and a handwritten label that said, "For mornings that don't need words." The sketch sat on my desk for 2 days. I didn't move it. Didn't touch it. Just glanced at it between emails and zoning maps, letting it breathe like it had its own quiet pulse. She'd labeled the pendant lights gentle glow in her messy, sideways handwriting. She used to call overhead lights angry. Said a kitchen deserved better than interrogation room fluorescence. I wondered if she knew I kept the sketch. Or if she assumed I'd thrown it out with the recycling and whatever was left of our trust. On the third morning, I slid the sketch into a plastic sleeve and pinned it to the idea board. My assistant Talia noticed. New client. I hesitated. No, old one. She gave me a look but didn't press. That's the thing about Talia. She knew how to leave space. Maybe that's why I kept her on even after our budget got tight. The budget was always tight after Elise left. She had pulled $720,000 before I caught it, invoices disguised as vendor costs, fake routing numbers, cash withdrawals buried under event budgets. The lawyers managed to reclaim about $120K through a painful process that felt like trying to squeeze blood out of a rock. But the rest, gone, vanished into whatever half-life Elise was living during those last months of the partnership. The hardest part wasn't losing the money. It was looking at all the things we never got to build. The children's museum we were supposed to design in Savannah. The container home artist residency in Vermont. The eco-village she used to talk about, with skylights shaped like feathers and floors that sang when you stepped on them. Ideas we'd pitched, dreamed up late at night, and had to walk away from because the foundation our trust had cracked. Still, I couldn't ignore the pull of that sketch. I found myself wondering, what if we didn't put her back in charge of budgets? What if she never touched the finances again? What if she just designed? It was a stupid thought. But grief makes you rewrite logic. And sometimes love, even fractured love, makes room for imagination. Later that week, I emailed her. Subject line, design thought. Message: if you ever feel like drafting again, the south wall of our new studio is a blank canvas. Just say it. I didn't expect a reply. But the next morning, I found a rolled briefcase at the front door, tucked between the Daily Mail and a half-spilled bag of garden soil someone had dropped by mistake. No signature. No note. Just the familiar imprint of her line work, bold where it needed to be, whisper-thin in the corners. It was a kitchen. But not just any kitchen. It was ours. The one from our childhood home, reimagined, counters lowered slightly, tiles patterned in a swirling motif of soft ochres and worn cream. There was even a note in the margins. Toe kick lighting in case Mom ever visits barefoot again. My throat caught. That evening I called Talia. "Do you believe in second chances?" I asked. There was a pause. Then her calm voice, "For who?" "For people who stole $720 K and your father's legacy, but also designed the most honest kitchen you've ever seen." Longer pause. Then, "Only if they show up with clean hands." Elise didn't show up right away. But she did send more sketches. One a week. Always unsigned. Always dropped off quietly. Each one was better than the last. And each one remembered something only she would know: the color of our old fence, the shape of our mother's tea kettle, the corner where Dad used to sit with his calculator and mutter about roof angles. It was like she was building her apology line by line. And I let her. Eventually, I made a decision. I opened the studio door one evening, flipped the closed sign, and texted her. "Sketches are good, but kitchens need hands." She didn't reply that night. But the next morning she was there. Standing at the sidewalk. In a gray hoodie and faded jeans, holding a toolbox. Looking like a stranger who used to be someone I trusted with my whole heart. I didn't hug her. Didn't smile. Just opened the door. "Third workstation is open," I said. "There's coffee on." She stepped inside like a ghost, afraid to be seen. But when she sat at the drafting table and pulled out her pencil and took a deep, anchoring breath, I saw something come back to life. Not trust. Not yet. But maybe the courage to rebuild it. One careful sketch at a time. It started with sweeping. Not design. Not decisions. Not even collaboration. Just Elise every morning at 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes before anyone else arrived, unlocking the door quietly with the spare key I'd left under the planter and sweeping the studio floor. She didn't ask for a key. She didn't tell me she'd be coming early. She just did it. Soft mechanical motions, long strokes of the broom from one end of the concrete to the other. No music, no lights on, just dawn pushing through the frosted windows and the sound of dust moving toward the corner. I watched once unseen from the hallway. She looked peaceful. Like she was clearing not just debris, but memory. I didn't say anything to her that day. But I bought a second broom. Left it leaning against the wall near her desk. She never used it. She kept using the old one, the one with the worn bristles and duct-taped handle, as if she didn't want to replace anything else until she was sure she'd earned it. We didn't talk much those first few weeks. She'd sketch in silence, clean when no one was looking, and refill the coffee pot before anyone noticed it was low. Clients didn't recognize her. Staff thought she was an intern or maybe just someone helping with post-COVID rebuilding. I didn't correct them. There was something comforting about her anonymity, the way she became part of the background, humbling herself, blending in. I caught her one morning arranging sample tiles into a floral pattern, then tearing it down before anyone saw. But I saw, and I left a note on her desk the next day. "Those petals were beautiful, don't hide them." She didn't reply. But the next morning the same pattern was laid out again, only this time in stone. One Friday, Talia pulled me aside. "You okay with this?" she asked, motioning toward Elise, who was sorting reclaimed wood near the back. I didn't lie. "No, not fully, but I think I'm okay with not being okay yet." Talia nodded. "She's quieter than before. She's carrying more than before. And you." I hesitated. "I'm trying to build something that doesn't collapse under memory." Talia just smiled. "That's the most architectural thing you've ever said." We were working on a project at the time, a micro-bakery design for a couple who'd been childhood sweethearts and wanted their shop to feel like the smell of home. Elise had offered to help with the cabinetry layout. Nothing major, just a rough sketch. When the couple saw it, the wife burst into tears. "It's exactly what I imagined," she whispered. "The counter that curved my grandmother's house had one just like that." Elise froze. She looked at me wide-eyed, unsure. I nodded gently. She smiled barely. That night I found a sticky note on my desk. It read, "I'll never touch a checkbook again, but if you'll let me draw, I'll never stop trying to rebuild what I broke." Something shifted after that. She started speaking during design reviews, tentatively at first, then with a little more confidence. Still no title, no salary, just an envelope of grocery cash every Friday and free lunch when she remembered to eat. But her sketches, they got better, bolder, more human. They weren't perfect like before. Not sharp with ambition, but soft, intimate, like someone designing not for press features but for forgiveness. One afternoon, I found her rearranging our material library, organizing samples by emotional tone, not just color or texture. Warmth, calm, conflict, nostalgia. I stared at the labels she'd written by hand. She caught me watching and shrugged. "Spaces feel things too," she whispered. "Maybe we should let them." That night I stood in the dark studio, alone, staring at our original blueprint from 5 years ago, the one she and I had drawn when we dreamed this place up. It was hanging behind my desk, faded now. I took it down, rolled it up, and replaced it with a new one. One we'd drawn that morning, together, for a yoga space with walls that could breathe and windows that caught the quiet. This was our second draft. Not of the studio. Of us. The next morning, I swept the studio before she arrived. She didn't say a word about it. But she noticed. And smiled. A real one. With both corners of her mouth. Like maybe the ground between us was clean again. She hadn't asked many questions about the business side. And I hadn't offered details. But the money still came in and went out, and I still had to meet with banks, manage contracts, and walk through loan terms that felt like landmines some days. I didn't expect her to care. Until the day she met Harrison. He walked in holding an oat milk flat white, my usual, and a folder filled with financial statements. His shirt was perfectly pressed. His jawline sharp. The kind of man who had once made Elise roll her eyes. He leaned on my desk like he belonged there. And Elise, seated a few feet away at the drafting table, glanced up from a sunroom sketch and froze. I didn't introduce them right away. Harrison was launching into numbers, quarterly margins, overhead squeeze, investor patience, and I was trying to keep my face composed while Elise quietly rolled her pencil between her fingers. He eventually noticed her. Smiled politely. "I don't think we've met, Harrison Tate." Elise stood, brushing dust from her jeans. "Elise? Just that. No last name. No handshake." He turned back to me. "I didn't know you had help." "She's not help," I said without thinking. "She's rebuilding." Harrison blinked. Elise blinked. And I wished I could claw the word back. After he left, the studio was quiet. She didn't go back to her sketch. Just stood by the window, staring out. "He seems good with numbers," she said after a long beat. "He is. He your new partner. In finances, that's all." She nodded once. "That's all it takes to replace someone, huh?" I didn't answer. Because no number of spreadsheets could balance out what she'd broken. Or what she'd left behind. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the word I'd used, rebuilding. It sounded charitable, controlled, a project. But Elise wasn't drywall. She was a person, with grit and fault lines and pieces I couldn't fit back together even if I tried. So the next morning I walked in with a second folder. Not for Harrison. For her. Inside. The original business license. A blank checkbook. A list of vendor contacts she used to manage. and one sticky note that said, "If you ever want your side back, start here." I left it on her desk and went into a meeting. When I came out, it was gone. The folder, the note, everything. My heart dropped. I thought maybe I'd pushed too hard. But then I saw it. Taped to the wall above her drafting table, a new sketch. This one wasn't of a building. It was a bridge. Two halves arching toward each other with the caption, "Trust isn't built, it's offered." She didn't take the checkbook. Didn't call the vendors. Didn't touch a single number. But that sketch, that was her answer. A few days later, Harrison returned. He brought brownies from the bakery we'd designed, a fresh set of projections, and an awkward energy that told me he still felt Elise's presence like static. But this time, Elise walked over to him. Handed him a sealed envelope. "It's the supplier list," she said, "from before." He looked confused. "I don't work with numbers anymore," she added, "but you do, so use them well." He opened the envelope, scanned the contents, and nodded slowly. "Thank you." She gave a tight smile, "Don't screw her over." Then she walked away. Harrison turned to me. "She's sharper than you let on." I just said she always was. That afternoon, Elise brought me a bowl of soup from the cafe next door, set it on my desk, didn't say anything. But underneath the spoon, there was another napkin sketch. This time, a storefront. Ours. With both our names on the awning. Side by side. Not above or below. Just equal. No fanfare. No signatures. Just the quiet idea that maybe we were finding our way back. The fire alarm went off at 2:36 p.m. on a Tuesday. Sharp, piercing, relentless. Everyone spilled out of the studio, half-done sketches in hand, laptops tucked under arms, coffee still steaming on desks inside. At first, I assumed it was a drill. Then I saw the smoke. Not thick, not wild, but real. Rising in gentle plumes from the back kitchenette, the toaster oven, it turned out, where someone had left a croissant a little too long. No flames, just smoke. Just enough panic to scramble the pulse. And in the middle of it all, Elise. Standing outside barefoot. Why was she barefoot? Cradling a fire extinguisher like it was a bouquet, covered in flour, her hair wild from heat and wind. I didn't even have time to speak before the fire marshal arrived. She did the talking, calm, measured. False alarm, just a near-crispy pastry. When the crowd began filtering back in, someone chuckled, "Guess Elise saved the day." And I saw it, that flicker behind her eyes. Not pride. Not even relief. Just a quiet ache, like being seen was still too much. Later that day, when everything settled, I found her seated at her station again, sketching something with fast, almost impatient lines. I leaned closer. It wasn't a building. It wasn't even a room. It was a timeline. Hours. From year one of the business to now, marked not in numbers but in moments. A tiny star where we signed our first lease. A teardrop where our mother passed. A jagged crack on the year she left. And a small, hand-drawn fire alarm near the edge, the day we almost burned down our second chance. She didn't notice me watching. That night I stayed late. There was something about the air, the faint lingering scent of smoke, the hum of silence after chaos that felt familiar. I walked past her desk on my way out. There was a note waiting. Folded, blank on the outside. Inside, only one line. Some debts can't be repaid, but I still wake up trying. I didn't cry. But I sat in my car for 20 minutes before starting the engine. The next day, we got a new commission. A local women's shelter wanted to redesign their intake area, warmer, safer, less clinical. It was a project I knew we could handle. But it felt deeper. It felt like something Elise should lead. I almost didn't say it. but I handed her the file anyway. "I trust you," I said. Her hand trembled when she took it. She didn't say thank you. Just nodded once, eyes wet. She threw herself into the work. Visited the shelter alone. Interviewed the staff. Watched the flow of people. Mapped out emotional responses to each hallway, each shadow. When she presented the first draft, we were all quiet. Because it wasn't just a blueprint. It was empathy drawn. Rounded corners on doorways to ease panic. Soft pink lighting for trauma comfort. Soundproofing panels behind waiting chairs. One of the directors whispered, "It feels like a hug." Elise didn't smile. But I saw her throat move when she swallowed. In the weeks that followed, I noticed something else. She started speaking to new interns. Correcting gently. Teaching. Not with authority but care. As if she knew what it meant to mess up and still be allowed to matter. One afternoon, Talia leaned over during a meeting and whispered, "She's healing this place." And I whispered back, "She's healing us." On the last Friday of the month, I stayed late again. The studio empty, moonlight spilling through skylights. On my desk was a new sketchbook. Leather-bound. Untouched. Inside, on the first page, she'd written, "Chapter 2. And nothing else." I left it there. Didn't write in it yet. Some stories need time. But this was no longer a rebuild. It was something better. A beginning written in forgiveness, drawn in trust, and lit by the quiet fire of someone who came back, not for redemption, but for truth. It was Talia who told us first. She burst into the studio on a rainy Thursday morning, dripping wet, waving a rolled-up copy of Foundry Interiors weekly like it was a lottery ticket. "They ran it," she gasped, "page 32. I thought she meant the bakery project. Or maybe the microloft we'd done downtown. But when she unrolled the magazine and slapped it onto my desk, there it was. A double-page spread. Glossy, centered, framed in warm neutrals. The comeback firm, how a fallen studio rebuilt its soul. And beneath the headline, a photo of both of us. Me, arms crossed, in front of the cedar-paneled reception desk we'd designed in year 2. And Elise seated beside me on the edge of the counter, sketchbook in her lap, looking out of frame like she hadn't realized the camera was rolling. She didn't know they were including her. She hadn't wanted to be interviewed. She'd politely declined the email I forwarded weeks ago. But apparently, the journalist had been watching. Saw her presenting at the shelter. Saw her walking a client through a custom interior with patience and grace. Saw her sweeping, still even now after all this time, without being asked. She stared at the photo in stunned silence. Then she whispered, "They didn't even ask." "No," I said, "they just saw." We stood there for a while, everyone buzzing around us. Some interns took selfies with the magazine. Clients texted congratulations. Even Harrison sent flowers with a note that said, "Glad I bet on the right people." But Elise didn't say much that day. She just kept touching the page. Like it might vanish. Later that evening, she found me in the back office. "I didn't deserve to be in that." "You earned it." Not for what I did, maybe for what I didn't do, walk away again. I looked at her then, really looked. At the soft lines forming around her eyes. The pencil calluses back on her fingers. The quiet fatigue of someone still carrying more than she lets show. "You didn't just stay," I said. "You built something better than before. You brought heart back into this place." She sat down across from me. "I just didn't want to be the story." "You're not," I told her. "You're the reason the story still has pages." A few days later, I found something tucked into my office bookshelf. It wasn't there before. A plain black envelope, sealed with a thin piece of copper wire. Inside, one small photograph. Us 7 years ago. Leaning over a drafting table, arguing about wallpaper, laughing, smiling. And on the back, in her handwriting, "We were always better when we were us." I didn't frame it. Not yet. But I put it inside my desk drawer, top one, right next to the lease. The lease we renewed together last month. The one that now lists both our names again. Not co-owners. Just co-creators. When the next client walked through our door, I noticed something funny. They didn't address me first. They looked straight at Elise, shook her hand, complimented her last portfolio, and said, "We heard you're the reason this place came back to life." She blinked, smiled, and said something that made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. I'm just the one who remembered what it was supposed to feel like. That night, after everyone left, I stood alone in the studio. I turned the lights off, let the moonlight spill in, and I whispered into the dark, "Thank you for coming back." Because forgiveness doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it walks in slowly, barefoot, holding a broom, sketching a future one quiet line at a time. We didn't plan a grand reopening. No balloons, no press releases, no champagne. Just a new door plate etched in brushed steel. Everett and Holt Interiors with Soul. It went up on a Tuesday morning. Drizzled rain, slow traffic, warm coffee in hand. Elise held the screwdriver. I held the level. It felt like hanging a name on a memory, one that had finally stopped aching. The week before, we'd finalized the plans for our most personal project yet. Not a client job. Not a commission. But something we were building for ourselves and for people like us. A small design mentorship studio for women re-entering the creative workforce after hardship, divorce, burnout, addiction, anything. We called it the drawing room. Because sometimes what you need isn't a restart. Just a table, a pencil, and someone who believes you still have a line left to draw. It started as an idea scribbled on a napkin. Elise's idea, actually. One night after hours, she left it taped to my screen. What if we taught them what we forgot and helped them rebuild what we nearly lost? I didn't hesitate. Let's do it. Now, 6 weeks later, we were standing in the back room of our studio, converting the dusty old supply closet into a sunlit corner with drafting tables, mood boards, and shelves of design books Elise had kept from college. One of our first mentees, a soft-spoken woman named Priya, brought us chai and cried quietly when Elise praised her first floor plan. "It's not about being perfect," Elise told her, hands gentle on the sketch. "It's about being in the room again." I had to step outside. Sometimes kindness catches you off guard like that. That afternoon, while sorting through some archived client files, I found something that made me pause. A letter unopened. Addressed to both of us. Postmarked a year ago. From our father. He passed 6 months back. I hadn't known this existed. I took it to the roof where Elise liked to sketch sometimes. She was up there, cross-legged, pencil smudged between her fingers. When I handed her the letter, she froze. Read the name. Then nodded once. Together. Together. We opened it in silence. His handwriting was uneven. Shaky, but unmistakably his. My girls, I don't know if you'll ever see eye to eye again. But I want you to remember this. You were always your strongest when you were building something together. You fought as kids. You built forts the next day. You argued over fabric swatches. You made beauty out of sawdust. If I ever gave you anything, I hope it was that. The knowledge that what matters isn't what you break, it's what you choose to fix. Dad. Elise folded the letter slowly. Wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. Then handed it to me. You keep it, she said. You always held the blueprint. We didn't say anything else. Just watched the sun dip low over the rooftops. Warm light. A soft breeze. The smell of fresh timber from the build site across the street. And for once, no tension between us. Just breath. And peace. The next day, I hung Dad's letter in our drawing room. Framed. Right next to the quote Elise had chosen for the launch. You don't have to rebuild the same thing. Just rebuild. We opened our doors quietly that following Monday. 4 new women walked in. All nervous. All silent. Elise met them with tea. I handed them sketchbooks. And together we began something I never thought I'd see again. Not a comeback, but a continuation. One rooted in grace, honesty, and the fragile, powerful act of letting someone return without punishment. I still keep that magazine cover in my drawer. Still read Elise's old note on tough days. Still leave the office lights on a little longer when I know she's working late, even if she forgets to ask. Because love isn't always loud. Sometimes it shows up quietly. In graphite smudges. In shared silence. In the knowledge that even if you lose everything, there's still a place and a person willing to hand you a pencil and say, "Start here."